विहारी। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON BBT Samstapakacharya, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, titled The Pandavas Retire Timely, text 39. Mathurāyāṁ tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ prājāpatyām nirūpyeṣṭim agnīn apibad īśvaraḥ mathurāyāṁ tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ prājāpatyām nirūpyeṣṭim agnīn apibad īśvaraḥ mathurāyāṁ tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ prājāpatyām nirūpyeṣṭim agnīn apibad īśvaraḥ mathurāyāṁ tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ prājāpatyām nirūpyeṣṭim agnīn apibad īśvaraḥ mathurāyāṁ tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ prājāpatyām nirūpyeṣṭim agnīn apibad īśvaraḥ mathurāyāṁ tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ prājāpatyām nirūpyeṣṭim agnīn apibad īśvaraḥ. mathurāyām tathā vajram śūrasena-patim mathurāyām tathā vajram śūrasena-patim tataḥ mathurāyām, at Mathura, tathā, also, vajram, Vajra, śūrasena-patim, king of the Śūrasenas, tathā, thereafter, prājāpatyāṁ, Prājāpatya sacrifice, nirūpya, having performed, īśvaraḥ, goal, agnīn, fire, apibad, placed in himself, īśvaraḥ, capable. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Kṛṣṇa, at Mathura as the king of Śūrasena. Afterwards, Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira performed a Prājāpatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire for quitting household life. Purport. Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, after placing Mahārāja Parīkṣit on the imperial throne of Hastinapur, and after posting Vajra, the great-grandson of Lord Kṛṣṇa, as the king of Mathurā, accepted the renounced order of life. The system of 4 orders of life and 4 castes in terms of quality and work, known as varṇāśrama-dharma, is the beginning of real human life. And Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, as the protector of this system of human activities, timely retired from active life as a sannyasi, handing over the charge of the administration to a trained prince, Mahārāja Parīkṣit. The scientific system of varṇāśrama-dharma divides the human life into 4 divisions of occupation and 4 orders of life. The 4 orders of life as brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyasi are to be followed by all, irrespective of the occupational division. Modern politicians do not wish to retire from active life even if they are old enough. But Yudhiṣṭhira Mahārāja, as an ideal king, voluntarily retired from active administrative life to prepare himself for the next life. Everyone's life must be so arranged that the last stage of life, say at least the last 15 to 20 years prior to death, can be absolutely devoted to the devotional service of the Lord to attain the highest perfection of life. It is really foolishness to engage oneself all the days of one's life in material enjoyment and fruitive activities, because as long as the mind remains absorbed in fruitive work and for material enjoyment, there is no chance of getting out from conditioned life or material bondage. No one should follow the suicidal policy of neglecting one's supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to Canto 1, Chapter 15, in the matter of Pandavas. The Pandavas retire timely. Text 39. Om Ajnānatimirandasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Caitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swaminiti Namine Nama Acharya Padaya Nitai Kripa Pradayine Gaura Katha Dhamadaya Nagragramatarine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Gopi Paranadhanadase Iti Namine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chait Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurudhanitarinam Yatkripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Caitanya Ishwaram Katanchana Smrite Yasmin Dushkaram Zukram Bhavet Smrite Viparitam Syat Sri Caitanyam Namamitam. So here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the varṇāśrama-dharma is a scientific system and is the beginning of real human life. Yet we may wonder why is it that Krishna's final instructions in the Bhagavad Gita is Sarva Dharman Paritejya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tam Sarvapapebhyo Mokshakshyami Masuchaha. So his final instruction is give up all kinds of dharma, which includes varṇāśrama-dharma. And here in this purport, Prabhupada is speaking how it is important to follow that. Interestingly, you'll also find, if you study the chronology of ISKCON and Prabhupada's instructions for the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, for the first few years, Srila Prabhupada said that varṇāśrama-dharma is not necessary. It's not necessary because bhakti alone is good enough. But subsequently, later on, he began to speak about it. So how do we draw the connection between all these different things? Now, if you look at all the different religious traditions of the world, generally, you'll find that all of them speak about giving up adharma, giving up irreligious activities. So you could say, in summary, that generally all the religious traditions of the world speak, although they may speak about other things, but they emphasize a lot on sarva adharman paritejya. Whereas if you take the Bhagavad Gita, in the 9th chapter, Krishna says this is the king of all education, king of all knowledge, most confidential knowledge. And in this book, it speaks about sarva dharman paritejya. So therefore it's considered that the Vedic literatures, especially the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, are like the unabridged dictionary, and every other religious tradition is like a abridged dictionary. So because Bhagavad Gita starts at a higher platform, it starts at the platform of for example, you don't find instructions like do not steal, you don't find basic moral instructions in do not sleep with your own mother. You don't find these kind of instructions in the Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjuna, who belonged to the Vedic society. So he was a very cultured member of the Vedic society. So therefore it is understood, it's that they're already following dharma. But then it says, give up dharma also. Sarva dharman pariteja also. But that's quite unusual, because normally you only hear about giving up adharma. But then Krishna is speaking about giving up dharma also. But the most essential thing that we need to understand, the most critical thing, is that one cannot be qualified to give up dharma unless one is free from adharma. There's no question of giving up dharma unless one is free from adharma. So therefore, Prabhupada initially he stressed a lot that bhakti alone is good enough. We don't need anything else other than bhakti. So, but when he saw that devotees were falling down, especially sannyasis were falling down, that's when he began to speak about varṇāśrama-dharma. Because if one falls down from the platform of bhakti, there's no question of performing adharma, because adharma and bhakti do not go together at all. They're completely opposite paths. So, however, if one is not able to follow the requirements of, when I say bhakti, I'm referring to pure bhakti, one is not able to meet the standards of pure bhakti, then at least one can take the help of varṇāśrama-dharma. So, what exactly is it? Is it also a kind of bhakti? What is it? So, to understand this, we can consider an analogy. Let's say material world is a place of misery. That Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, that the material world is a place of misery. So, it's like driving on a road filled with potholes. So, while driving on such a road, if you have a very good vehicle and you have a good GPS connection, suppose you don't know how exactly to get where you want to get to. So, suppose you have a very good vehicle and you have a good GPS connection, then you can manage the ride more or less. But if you have a terrible vehicle and you have a poor GPS connection, then the ride becomes miserable, and you may even decide to give up on the ride. So, so when the GPS is like the connection that we have with Krishna through the performance of bhakti. So it's like the stronger the connection, the more clearer you are how to get to the goal. But the weaker the connection, then you're going to struggle. So if the connection is strong, then it does not really matter sometimes. I mean, depending on how inspired you are. I mean, if your connection is very strong, generally you are driven to get to the destination. So even if you have a bad vehicle, you may still get to the destination. But suppose your connection is weak and you also have a terrible vehicle. So first of all, it's a miserable ride. On top of that, you don't even know how to get to the destination properly. Then one may feel like giving up the ride altogether. So that is where varṇāśrama comes into the picture. That if we at least adopt the varṇāśrama system, you're going to have a good vehicle at least. You're not going to have a miserable ride. Even if the connection is GPS connection is not very strong, nevertheless you have a luxurious vehicle. Even though the road is filled with potholes, still, because the vehicle is luxurious, you must still manage to keep progressing. So that is why Prabhupada stressed in his later days that varṇāśrama is essential, because he noticed that devotees were falling into adharma, giving up the practice of bhakti, all kinds of things were happening. So he wanted to ensure that devotees do not give up the process of bhakti at any cost. So he was very do whatever is needed. He was willing to do whatever is needed to ensure that devotees stay on the path of pure bhakti. The Pandavas are the greatest inspiration for all those who are living a life of living a life of struggle or living in this material world, because the Pandavas if we observe, they went through all kinds of difficulties, That's why it is explained that the Lord, when He wants to demonstrate what it means to be a pure devotee, He uses the eternal associates of the Lord to demonstrate that what exactly is the standard of pure devotion. So the Pandavas, they went through unimaginable miseries. I mean, in fact, the very last thing that they underwent was all the children were massacred. Like the same Krishna who protected Draupadi by giving her unlimited cloth, who protected her from the wrath of Durvasa Muni, but he did nothing when the sleeping sons of Draupadi were killed. So nevertheless, the Pandavas just take it as the will of the Lord. So they went through unimaginable tribulation, the poison cake, so many tribulations, but they remained unwavering on the path of pure devotional service. They're completely unwavering, and this is the finest example of that they were not interested in material enjoyment, because after such a difficult struggle for years on end, finally Yudhiṣṭhira is crowned as the king. But as soon as he's crowned as the king, within a short time, Krishna leaves the planet. And then what do the Pandavas do? The Pandavas are just, immediately they also decide to leave the world. But now, I mean, it's difficult to imagine how somebody has struggled for such a long time, so many years. Finally, they become, Yudhiṣṭhira has become the king. And then when Krishna leaves the planet, just immediately they also leave. So this is their attachment, this is their level of devotion to Krishna, that for them it didn't matter what material opulence they had, what material facility they had. What really mattered to them was Krishna's presence in their life. And if that presence is not there, what use is it to live? That was their this thing. So they are the finest examples of pure devotees. So it says that when we saw earlier in this chapter how how Arjuna is feeling so much grief, separation from the Lord, that he's getting defeated, his heart is feeling void, so many things are going on. So they're very, very unusual for someone like Arjuna. But nevertheless, because of his, it's happening because of his intense attachment to the Supreme Lord. For such people, it is not necessary that they have to. It's not necessary for Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira to give up the kingdom. It's not necessary to give up, because they're already situated on that level of perfection, as we can see here, that effortlessly they just gave up the whole kingdom. So for such a person, it is not really necessary. But nevertheless, they do it to set an example for all of us. So sometimes this question comes up in our Krishna consciousness movement, that Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu said that sannyas is not essential for everyone. That is a fact, that sannyas is not essential for everyone. At the same time, if we look at the whole teachings of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, in fact, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Mahaprabhur Bhaktaganer Vairagya Pradhan Se Deki Pritihon Gaura Bhagavan. That among all the characteristics of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees, Vairagya, the detachment is prominent. Mahaprabhur Bhaktaganer Vairagya Pradhan Se Deki Pritihon Gaura Bhagavan. So, if one has to not give up family life, then one should actually be situated on that platform of Vairagya. Then one is doing it for the sake of the Krishna conscious movement by the instruction of some superior authority. But if one is still some material attachment, then definitely the recommended thing is to give up that material attachment. So it depends on one's personal state of consciousness. Yes, in principle it's not required, provided one is actually detached from material affairs. But if one is not detached, then definitely one is recommended to the steps like sannyas are essential, so that one becomes detached from mundane affairs and becomes fully focused on the devotional service of the Lord, which is what Prabhupada mentioned. At least one should spend 15 years of life which is mentioning in this purport. So, because there's a difference between dovetailing and, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers, Prabhupada actually refers to Karma Yoga as action in Krishna consciousness. In the 5th chapter, he actually says Karma Yoga is action in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna consciousness has many levels. So the preliminary level of Krishna consciousness is whatever be one's inclination, one acts according to one's inclination and engages the result of it in the service of the Lord. So that's action in Krishna consciousness, the preliminary stage. But as one advances in Bhakti Yoga, as one advances in Krishna consciousness, one comes to the platform of whatever is needed for the Lord, one is willing to do it. Whether it is one's nature or not one's nature, whatever is willing for the service of the, whatever is needed for the service of the Lord, one is willing to do. So technically, that's the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Technically, although both of them are Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada, sometimes people find this difficult. Why is Prabhupada calling everything Krishna consciousness? You know, so but it depends on, there is some subtleties there. The subtle the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is Karma Yoga, one is acting according to one's psychophysical nature, but on the platform of Bhakti Yoga, one is actually doing whatever it takes to please the Lord. But although both of them are called Krishna consciousness, so one has to progress to that level that one is willing to do whatever it takes for the service of the Lord. One is not bound by one's own conditioning. For example, Srila Prabhupada, when he went to the West, we notice, of course he is a pure devotee and eternal associate of the Lord, but we noticed that he did everything. He was sweeping the floor, cleaning up after the devotees had prasadam. He practically did everything, managing, distributing books. Everything that was necessary to establish the Krishna consciousness movement, he did it. But then everyone may not be situated on the platform, so then people started falling down. So then all these considerations of varṇāśrama, engaging according to one's nature, all these different things came up subsequently, which ultimately Prabhupada's consideration was that it is important not to give up the practice of Krishna consciousness, not to give up one's fight against Maya. So that's the emphasis that Prabhupada lays in his purports on Gajendra. When one of his sannyasis fell, he said it's important not to give up the fight against Maya. So if it means that if someone is able to fight Maya better by being in a grihastha life, then one should do that. You know, so the emphasis that Prabhupada laid upon was that one should be Krishna conscious. One's practice of bhakti should not get interrupted. You know, and slowly one will gradually, definitely come to the platform where one is just engaged in doing whatever it takes to serve the Lord. So Prabhupada said one does not need to get an external certificate for one's advancement in Krishna consciousness. One can judge by oneself. You know, he said, just like Bhagavatam itself gives the example, that when we are hungry and when we eat food, two things happen, which we feel happy, then feel nourished, and also hunger goes away. So Prabhupada would repeatedly say again and again and again and again, he would say that this is the test. So when we practice bhakti, if proper practice of bhakti means our attraction for Krishna should gradually keep increasing to the point of madness. For example, Arjuna is exhibiting symptoms of madness in his relationship with Krishna. Madness in a positive sense, his attachment for Krishna is so strong. When Krishna disappears from the planet, he's feeling vacant. All kinds of unusual things are happening with him. That's because of his intense attachment for Krishna. And they're also now exhibiting this detachment, not just attachment, because sometimes attachment alone is not the test. Detachment is also very important. They're exhibiting both. Arjuna is exhibiting attachment earlier, now he's exhibiting detachment also. And Prabhupada repeatedly says this is the test, because he gave the example of Bhagavatam speakers. Like if we go to Vrindavan in Kartik, it's very common to find Bhagavata Saptaha advertisements all across town, you know, everywhere, wherever you see, so many speakers giving Bhagavata Katha. But Prabhupada said that quite often when they go to this Katha, you may even find them crying, they may feel happy, they may feel ecstatic also. But once they go home, not just the speaker, but also the audience, once they go home, they'll think, okay, let me resume my cigarette, or I took a vow to abstain from meat for 1 week of the saptaha. Oh, now's the chance, let me go back to that. So Prabhupada said, just some attraction, feeling some attraction for Krishna alone is not enough. That one should also feel detachment. Two things should simultaneously happen. So we see here how Arjuna in this chapter is exhibiting intense signs of attachment to Krishna. Here we see that how the Pandavas are immediately giving up their whole kingdom the moment Krishna disappears. So they're exhibiting both attachment and simultaneously they're exhibiting detachment. So this is the standard of Krishna consciousness. So we should be able to judge by ourselves how are we progressing in our Krishna consciousness. As we progress, is our attachment to Krishna increasing? As Prabhupada said, we're all meant to become mad after Krishna. Is that madness setting in? Are we going in the direction of that madness? And is our detachment also setting in? As we practice, if that is not happening, then we have a serious problem. We need to examine where we're going wrong and how to fix it immediately, because we have only one lifetime. So we have no time to waste. So this simultaneous experience of developing madness for Krishna and at the same time feeling detachment for affairs of this material world is important. So whatever it takes to develop that, Prabhupada facilitated it. So therefore he said, seeing the general trend of how the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness were doing, so he recommended that we should take up the system of varṇāśrama-dharma, because at least it will ensure that devotees steadily progress and attain love of God rather than falling down into adharma and other sinful activities. So these are some of the things that I could think of for this purport. And Padmabad Prabhu has been, last few occasions, he told me that you have to end the class at 8:45. Then you can ask questions, but don't go beyond 8:45. And questions you can take, but whatever it is, by 9 o'clock you should end the class. So I thought that I'll speak a little bit on this, and I mean not too much on it, because it's a very vast topic and there could be possibly many questions on this. So I'll stop here, and if there are any questions or comments, please go ahead. Yes, Puji. Yes. Yes.
But still, since they are new and we need to ascertain what they are.
Yes. Now, yes, bro. He's saying that how do we ascertain our psychophysical nature? Not just for ourselves, even for people who join the movement. How do we ascertain their psychophysical nature? Now, before ascertaining the psychophysical nature, it is important that, like during the days that I joined the Krishna consciousness movement, I don't know how much of it happens these days, but normally what used to happen when some devotee first of all takes to Krishna consciousness is that they are given all kinds of service, especially cleaning the floors, cleaning the toilets. This was very important part of the training of training Krishna consciousness, because first of all we have to learn that all services to the Lord are absolute. It's not that a sweeper is more valuable than a temple president. Everybody is more valuable service than everybody is doing important service. So one has to first of all come to the platform of accepting that all services are absolute. Then one can begin to think of where. So that initial experience may be a little bit uncomfortable, because one has to do all kinds of things which one may not be used to. No. I never touched a broom in my whole life, and I was a lone child, spoiled child in that sense. My mother used to do everything for me. But once I came to the temple, I had to touch a broom, clean the floor, do all kinds of things. So although it is uncomfortable, so whether it's comfortable or not, one does not have that luxury. One has to first of all learn that devotional service is absolute. But once the preliminary training is done, then it's not, psychophysical nature is not very difficult to ascertain. At least one's basic nature one knows that, Okay, I like certain kind of activities. Like for example, some devotees like to study, they like to teach. And some devotees like to manage. Some devotees just like to do artistic things and different things. These tendencies are kind of not given a choice. What would you like to do? Most people would say that actually, you know. So why do they say that? Because they know that is something which keeps their mind free from unnecessary thoughts and unnecessary trouble, you know. So that's the idea. So yes, but once it's not that one is purely only interested in teaching or one is purely interested only in managing. It doesn't usually happen like that. Usually there's a predominance. So one should try to find what is one's predominant nature and try to find engagements accordingly. But nevertheless, the training is important, because unless one has that training that all services are absolute, there's a tendency that one may become restless. But that training is important, because at least one will recognize that, okay, let me just go through what I am going through now. When Krishna so desires, he will provide me engagement according to my psychophysical nature. Yes, Lord.
Even if you give training, still we are going to act according to our own nature. Anyways.
Yes. Yes. So there's nothing wrong in acting according to one's nature. Nothing wrong in that. Gurukul is something else. Okay, that's there's a difference between training children when they're young. So they'll be, but those of us who have been already in the material world, you know, we are already conditioned in a certain way, you know, and so for us it may be more difficult to do all the different elements of devotional service. But whereas when children, they're more flexible. As Prabhupada said, bamboo when it is green, it's more flexible. But when a bamboo is yellow, then it's less flexible. So the Gurukul, yes, but those children who are born in the Krishna conscious movement, they have definitely more flexibility. Of course, you still have to engage them according to their nature. But whereas for us, it may be more difficult, because the fact that we are already conditioned in so many ways to see everything as absolute, to see everything as this high, low, all these different things are problematic for us. So in that sense, we may struggle, but nevertheless, we can still be engaged according to our nature. There's nothing wrong in that. By being engaged in one's nature, one gets purified. One begins to develop one's Krishna consciousness. Eventually one begins to be able to do other things also, even if it is not according to one's nature, because one's attraction for Krishna increases. Then you begin to think, oh, Prabhupada established the Krishna conscious movement, and this area, something needs to be done. Nobody's doing it. I need to do something about it, even if I don't like it. Because one's attachment for Srila Prabhupada, attachment for Krishna has increased to an extent that one is able to go beyond one's psychophysical nature also.
So basically we get attached to Prabhupada and then we are ready to do anything for Krishna.
Yeah, that comes eventually, yes.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu had a question. I'll just come back to him. He raised his hand second, so just...
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, like when a sadhak or like struggling devotee is like properly following the process of this Krishna consciousness and is trying his best to detach from this material affair, but still his failure, like it's not like detaching from this material affairs.
Okay.
So what he should take it as? He should take it as like it's Krishna's wish or some error in his sadhana.
Material attachment is entirely our responsibility. It's not Krishna's wish. However, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, if you notice his purport to text 31 of the 3rd chapter, the very last few lines are very important. He says that in the beginning stages of Krishna consciousness, one may not be able to execute the injunctions of the Lord perfectly. But one should not feel a sense of, I'm just paraphrasing it, one should not feel a sense of defeat or hopelessness, but one should continue and one eventually will become successful. So, in the beginning stages, one may even fail actually. But later on, the failure may stop. But the attachments would gradually decrease. Again, everything depends on one's intensity of bhakti, how intensely one is practicing. Depending on the intensity of practice, the quicker it will go away. But it's a process. It can happen instantly. One is like Katvanga Muni, but that's rare. Generally, it takes time. And how much time depends on one's own practice. Krishna is not responsible for that. It's our own, material attachment is our problem. Krishna can provide facilities to get out of it, but we need to get out of it.
Maybe sometimes like Krishna wants us to we should remain in this material world and perform our duties first. Then maybe because of that.
Krishna wants us to remain in the material world and do our duties first. No.
Or material duties also.
No, that is not the teaching of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said the only duty one has is to develop love for Krishna. There's nothing. So any duty which helps that duty, we should accept. So that the understanding that you presented is what is generally known in India, that Krishna wants us to do our duties. But Krishna's teaching, as Prabhupada is in the Bhagavad Gita as it is that our duty, only duty in life is to develop love of God. And every other duty is meant to assist that duty. So one should perform every other duty to assist that duty. There's no separate existence of duty.
So in early stage, as we are not pure devotees, so
any stage,
how can we understand what Krishna expects from us, or wants?
What Krishna expects? So that's why we have the society of devotees. Prabhupada created the society of devotees. So we have superior Vaishnavas, we have Guru. First of all, we should read Prabhupada's books. So then we'll be clearly situated in what is right, what is wrong. Then the question comes up of what is specifically to be done. First of all, we need to know what is right, what is wrong. Then what we should do specifically, that we need to consult our superiors, the spiritual master and others would be able to. One can present one's inclination and one liking, but sometimes, it's like, how do you say, okay, I've not gone to a gym, so I can't be, but I've heard this example, so which may be a relevant example, but I don't know the nuances of the example. In a gym, there is a trainer who trains you how to do things, how to improve your body, So don't do too much, don't do too less. They know exactly what is to be done. So like that, even in the practice of bhakti, those who are experienced, they know this is too much for you, you may not be able to handle this, or this is too less. So sometimes you may be doing less. Then they ask, why are you doing so less? You can do much more. They'll push you to do more. So like that. So there you need to have people who are experienced in Krishna consciousness who can help you.
As we have seen, in daily practice of devotees, whatever happened in their life, they take it as it's Krishna's wish.
Yes.
So it is wrong or right?
It is right. Whatever is happening in our life is Krishna's will.
It means if some material desire is there, it means that is also right.
No, material desire is not Krishna's will. So, material desires are coming because of our own activities of past lives, and it's there stored as in our subtle body. So they are coming. So Krishna has given us a manual. Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, all these things are there. How to handle it. So that Krishna is not happening. It is happening due to our own past lives, what we have done. So when you say everything is happening by the will of Krishna, yes, ultimately the remembrance is also coming from Krishna only. There's no doubt in that. But it's not like there's a difference between something happening by its own course and something Krishna wanting to make it happen. Like Krishna intervenes in the life of a devotee. That's what I'm trying to distinguish between. When one surrenders to Krishna, Krishna intervenes. So Krishna does not intervene to make you act in a material way and all that. How do I say? Yeah, okay, let's put it like this. That Prabhupada said that once one surrenders unto Krishna, then there is no more karma actually. Technically speaking, there is no more karma. Once one accepts the six-fold process of surrender, technically there is no more karma. Everything is happening by the will of the Lord. But it is our duty how to respond properly. So if Krishna is giving us a test, we need to know how to respond properly. That's there. But we can't say that material desire is being provided by Krishna. The origin is us. Origin is us, not Krishna.
Basically, nothing is material or spiritual. Whatever is used in the Krishna service, that is spiritual.
Whatever is used in Krishna service is spiritual. That's correct.
When any sadhak or any devotee, is serving Krishna or is going under process of this Krishna consciousness. So what is material then? Because everything.
It's a good question. It's a good question. See, the definition of Yukta Vairagya is very important. It begins with Anasakta Vishayan. So technically, Yukta Vairagya means engaging everything in the service of the Lord by being in an unattached manner. That only the pure devotees can do. We cannot do that. But still, whatever we are attached to, we are engaged in the service of the Lord. So that we come to that platform of Yukta Vairagya. That being able to do it in an unattached manner. Right now, because we are attached, we are dovetailing it in the service of the Lord, which is what we are supposed to do. But that's not the technical definition of Yukta Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya begins at Anasakta Vishayan. It means one being unattached when one engages in the service of the Lord. That is called Yukta Vairagya. So that only the pure devotees can do. But we are being trained for that. So how do we train for that? How do we train for that? Whatever we are attached to, we engage in the service of the Lord, and we slowly become purified. So then one becomes eligible. Then, like for example, Prabhupada, he handled millions of dollars, he handled all kinds of things, but he was not affected by it because he was on an unattached platform. Whereas you can see other devotees, they may have handled it and they fell down. Why? Because their attachment was there. So Yukta Vairagya, technically speaking, is only when one is unattached. But until then, you could call it a training for Yukta Vairagya. You could, like Prabhupada sometimes gave the example of ripe mango and the green mango. So green mango can be considered like the training for Yukta Vairagya, like that.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes,
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for your class. My question is that, like you talked about varṇāśrama and Prabhupada wanted to implement. So my query is that.
Mike.
Okay. It's audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you talked about varṇāśrama and Prabhupada wanted to implement it. So is Devi varṇāśrama or varṇāśrama required for Mayapur? So my query is that, because there are a lot of role models in India and abroad, self-sustainable farm community. So is it required at Mayapur? So that's my query.
See, farm is one thing. That's very basic. But then you have much more than a farm. Varṇāśrama is much more than farm, because Prabhupada spoke about administrator, Kshatriyas, lot more things are there, you know. So it is a work in progress. And nobody has claimed to have figured it out yet. You know, like recently someone sent me a tape, a recording, you know, and what's it? Even what is it? Properly in ISKCON, you hear that okay, Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj is really pushing for varṇāśrama-dharma and Bhakti Raghav Maharaj. But this was a tape where Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj is saying, I have also not figured it out. I need help from the devotees to see how it is to be done. So it is not a, because the thing with varṇāśrama-dharma, that way Prabhupada wanted it, it is Daiva Varṇāśrama. So Prabhupada is very particular that you cannot refer to devotees as Kshatriya Vaishnavas and Brahmana Vaishnavas and all these. There's no such designation. Everybody is to be referred as Vaishnavas. The idea is, whatever is their inclination, they are supposed to be engaged according to that. But there's no such distinction between higher and lower in terms of how the normal Varṇāśrama is understood. So everybody is to be considered Vaishnava. That's very important. With that as the basis, if this is done, it will work. Now, there are so many elements in that. So it's still a work in progress. I don't know when it's going to happen. But what I believe is that Ravindra Swarup Prabhu wrote an article, which I think is the way to go forward. He said, unless we first of all have a society of Brahmanas, first of all the head has to be there. Without that, other things will not manifest so easily. So I think that it will really take shape when we have a society of genuinely advanced Brahmanas. When they get together, then other things will fall in place. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, my question is usually when we talk about Grahastha ashram, it's usually comes under the purview of karma yoga. You perform certain activities and then you, as a result, you dedicate it to in service of Krishna. But my question is that how can Grahastha perform devotional service? Is it 100% following the instruction of the authority and guru? Does that come into pure devotional service and complete surrender? Or is it that we can still adjust it somewhere, and like you said, that we can engage as per our inclination in service of Krishna?
If we follow Rupa Goswami's principle, then Prabhupada did not use that expression karma yoga. That's why I was very careful, because Prabhupada said action in Krishna consciousness. He only used the expression called Krishna consciousness, because especially for devotees, there's no question. I mean, it's a little bit inappropriate to call them karma yogis, because they're Their goal is to attain love of Godhead. Karma yogi, technically their goal is not to immediately attain love of Godhead and all that. Eventually, yes. So technically we don't refer to devotees as karma yogis. So they are practitioners of Krishna consciousness. They are engaging according to their psychophysical nature. However, if one does it according to the principles of what Rupa Goswami said, like how do you purify your old grihastha life? Whatever you earn. Now this is it can be a big discussion, but in principle, 50% of your earnings should be engaged in the service of the Lord. That is a standard. Now, that's a detail, because then, not a detail, there is so many questions that can come up with it. Then, is the rent included, and so many different things, tax, and so many things come into the picture. But let's set aside the details for a moment, and let's deal only with the principle now, which is that one is properly situated in grihastha life if one is able to give 50% of one's earning to the service of the Lord. So then, such a life is considered a life in pure devotional service. If one wants to use that for some material enjoyment and also Krishna conscious, that's where the problem comes. You know, like for example, one wants to spend some money, whatever, for some material enjoyment. There are varieties of material enjoyment. And say, okay, anyway I'm in grihastha life, I have a license for something. No, it's not true. We don't have a license for material enjoyment. We only have a license to do certain things in a bona fide way which sannyasis and brahmacharis cannot do. That's all. But it's a license to do things in a bona fide way. It's not like some, okay, we are an exception. No, it's not an exception. That's why it's called an ashram, Prabhupada says. Ashram means, you have certain rules and regulations, and if we act within the rules and regulations, then it's fine. You know, so it's important that in ISKCON the problem traditionally has been that if someone becomes a grihastha, it is considered as a fall down. You know, it's considered as a fall down. You know, it's like, oh, you're useless, or it's considered as a fall down. But if you look at Kardama Muni's story, you know, I don't think anyone in ISKCON has practiced austerities and meditation like way Kardama Muni practiced for thousands of years. You know, but when he becomes a grihastha, of course, it's a higher planetary system, so their standards are a little different. But nevertheless, the principle, when he takes up grihastha life, you don't see him regretting, no, that, oh Lord, what happened to me now? I was practicing so nicely, suddenly I fell down. You don't have all these kind of thoughts. In fact, you find him to be very responsible. Okay, I've taken this up now. This is what is suitable for me now, and I need to do this right and exit also at the right time, which he does. You know, so while he is engaged in the activity, he is not in some, he's not some schizophrenic person thinking that, oh, I've fallen down, somehow or the other I'm doing this. He's not doing it in a half-baked, he's not doing it he's not resenting it. He's doing it with all his heart, thinking that this is what I need to do to serve the Lord, to please the Lord. So he does all his duties in that mood of, I need to please the Lord, I need to serve the Lord. You know, so grihastha ashram is supposed to be taken up in that spirit, that this is an ashram meant for me to advance in Krishna consciousness. It is not an ashram of fall down or superficial detachment. You know, like sometimes this question comes up: is detachment applicable only to grihastha, only to sannyas, or is it also applicable to grihasthas? It's applicable to everyone. Detachment means I'm not looking for my enjoyment. That's the meaning of detachment. I'm looking at, so if someone is married, they're supposed to think, how shall my wife advance in Krishna consciousness? How shall my children advance in Krishna consciousness? Not how shall my wife serve me? How shall she be subservient to me? How shall my children serve me? How can this happen to me? It's not me-centered. It's Krishna-centered. And for that, you need to be detached. If you're not detached, you cannot be like that. You will always be thinking in terms of your own self. And that, therefore, detachment is very important in all the ashrams. Detachment is necessary for love. If you're not detached, you cannot really love in any ashram. Unless you're detached, you cannot genuinely love anyone. So when you're detached, then you begin to think about the other person's welfare. Therefore, detachment is important, but it's not detachment in an inappropriate sense. In the proper sense, which means thinking everything. How shall I please Krishna? So how everyone is an instrument to please Krishna. So how shall I serve my wife? How shall I serve my children? How shall I serve whoever it takes to attain love of Godhead? So one is always in that mode. So one is detached from one's personal sense gratification. So similarly, one is earning. If one is engaging in that 50% of the earning in service of the Lord, and whatever else one is doing, one is always connecting it with the Supreme Lord, then one is perfectly situated. You okay? Okay, now we have reached 9 o'clock. I think a few minutes over 9. Sorry, I didn't notice the time. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai.